right. Well, it is 4 o'clock on the dot here, local time. I will go ahead and get us started here. First off, I want to introduce myself, and I also want to introduce Brianna Kua. Brianna is our Director of Marketing and Brand Communications for Maker Maven. So a lot of those awesome STEM challenges, social media posts, and a lot of great content that you see coming from Maker Maven. Brianna is our go-to person. She helps us take care of all of that to get our educators the best resources that we can find. And my name is Matt Garcia. I am co-owner of Maker Maven along with my wife Jamie, who is probably going to be joining in here at some point, probably just as a visitor and won't participate, but we'll all be in here having fun together. So we'll move on to a couple of housekeeping items here to get started. So please feel free to openly use the chat. On your chat box, go ahead and make sure that you have it toggled to all panelists and all participants. So everybody can see what the chat is, what's going on in the chat, so we can interact and go back and forth. If you have any immediate questions, please feel free to jump in with any questions in the chat, or if anything just pops in your mind a little bit later that you might want Ken to answer near the end of his presentation, go ahead and pop it into the Q&A section as well, and we can go ahead and get all of your questions answered as they come up. We would absolutely love for you to continue the conversation after you're done listening to Ken present here on our social media pages. So we are active on Twitter and Facebook. So at Maker_Maven is a great place to connect with us and continue the conversation from what we're all about to learn today. So as I mentioned, we have Ken here with us today. So Ken Ehrmann is the secondary instructional coach at Penridge Director of Learning. So out in Pennsylvania, I saw somebody was in here from Pennsylvania that actually learned about us through STEM Camp. So that's really cool that we're able to cross back and forth with all of our great educators. So STEM Camp EDU is the in-house professional development team for Maker Maven. So if you ever need somebody to come out and speak on anything specific, STEM or STEAM wise, or more of a broad overall building a culture of STEM and STEAM on your campus, your library, your makerspace, anything like that, that's when we'll tap into the wealth of knowledge that Ken and his team at STEM Camp and PD Campus have for us. So we'll go ahead and let Ken get started here.
Thank you, Matt. Just get my screen share up and rolling. And Matt or Brianna, can you just give me a thumbs up that it all looks good? Awesome.
It looks good.
So yeah, thank you, Matt. Thanks for the welcome. I always enjoy our time together, joining STEM Camp and Maker Maven. We've been working together for a few years now, and it's really built into a nice partnership where we're all about putting the educators first. I'm always happy to talk about classroom instruction, although I always find myself in the STEM conversation and the tech ed conversation. My passions and my message, I try to always boil down to creating great classroom instruction. And I measure great classroom instruction on one metric, and does it make it a better experience for students? And so that's the goal with this presentation here, is to just help us understand some key strategies that we can use for incorporating STEM into instruction. The strategies I think you'll see will apply well beyond STEM, but that will be the focus. And we're also going to tackle the current state of education and how COVID has had a major impact on that for us, and how we can pivot and adjust and do our best to not lessen or decrease the positive experience for teachers and for students. And so, just highlighting our objectives for today. Like I said, we're going to focus on quality instruction. At some point later in the presentation, we are going to dive into, what can this look like in a traditional classroom setting? And by traditional, I mean where, let's go with the phrase 2019 normal. And then, what does this look like if my school district were back, but we have less kids, or we have to maintain a distance, or we're fully virtual, or somewhere in between, and where you go from there to start. Brianna and Matt are operating the chat and the Q&A. So anytime you have questions that pop up, please feel free to put those in there. I encourage you to do so. I gave Brianna and Matt permission to pose those questions to me as they see fit. Sometimes they will interrupt me because it fits perfect with the conversation going on. And other times they're going to hold that question until we get to the end of the presentation and just do some general Q&A. So we'll have some fun today. Like I said, dump those in there, and so we can interact together as best as possible, even though I can't see any of you right now. So we'll try to make it feel a little bit more personal. So as Matt said, just to give a little bit more background on myself, I spent 7 years teaching 5th grade. I had the opportunity to specialize in math, then transitioning to teaching all the subjects. I spent a year as a GS and STEM teacher in a pilot program in Penn Ridge, and now I am working as the secondary instructional coach for the district. So I'm working with administrators and teachers in our middle schools and high school. Additionally, outside of Penn Ridge, I'm a part of the STEM Camp EDU team, which is an event that we've put on for the last few years, as well as doing the professional development for Maker Maven. And I serve as Director of Learning for PD Campus, which is the company that powers STEM Camp EDU. And we also provide customized PD and professional development. So a lot of experience all related around instruction with students, and instruction with kids. And there's a little star on the map of Pennsylvania, just so you can see where Penn Ridge is. We're a rural suburb outside of Philadelphia. Please feel free to send any tweets or shoot any tweets out during the presentation. Tag Maker Maven, as Matt indicated. My Twitter handle is at the bottom of the screen as well. So feel free to tag me, take screenshots or pictures of any slide that sticks with you. I always enjoy hearing thoughts and reading thoughts of educators afterwards. And it's a great way for us to stay connected on social media as well. So the focus of today is really talking about, STEM learning and what that looks like, but also, what are the things related to STEM learning? And there's a lot of acronyms that are thrown around: project-based learning and student-centered learning and stations and all these different things that seem to circle around the same conversations. And so, when we step back and think of the pedagogy behind STEM, it's really about student-centered learning. And I define student-centered learning with the definition that you can see. And the key aspects are that the learners or the students are leading the learning community. However, that is not removing the educator. It is putting the educator in a different role where they may be in the limelight less, but their role is more important than ever. And it's their job to establish that community through effective pedagogy, a positive culture, and efficient learning spaces. And that term, learning spaces, is definitely different now than it ever has been before. So thinking about these concepts briefly before we jump into some example STEM lessons, it's our goal to float in the center of this image, taking all three into account. When we ignore one, it lessens the other two, and building strategies to accomplish this. So something that is a strategy that I always encourage with teachers when they're trying new things, and it's typically related around the topic of technology and STEM nowadays, but it can be new instructional strategies that don't involve any devices. And you want to think of ways to blend a new skill and curriculum at the same time. Our curriculum is important. We can't ignore our standards, but this pressure of teaching new things and using new tools is a reality. And this idea of what I call blending objectives is a simple way to accomplish this goal. So what this essentially is saying to do is, let's say you want to teach your students how to use a robot, or you want to teach them how to code. Well, if you're going to teach them coding, patterns is a part of that. So perhaps you're tying into a standard of patterns as you teach them code language, or you teach them a block coding program where they have to build patterns. And so now you've taken the opportunity to teach them how to use the coding program while they're practicing a skill that they've already mastered or close to mastered in recognizing and creating patterns. And so by taking a strategy like this, you are authentically reviewing important curriculum in your classroom, but you're tackling the idea of teaching this new tool or this new skill that you want to be able to teach them. And the benefit of that is at some point, the image flips. You've started to incorporate these skills and these pieces of technology. And now the students don't need to learn how to use a coding program. They don't need to learn how to sequence block code, but they do need to learn new curriculum. And so you can find ways to actually utilize the coding program to teach new curriculum. And so they're no longer focused on figuring out the coding. They're focused on figuring out the curriculum. So a simple example could be designing code to move a robot or to move a figure on the coding program to move in a rectangle, or to move into or to create a rectangle with a certain perimeter, depending on the grade level you teach. And so now you're teaching your students about the polygons and perimeter and those different math standards, and they're not focused on learning the coding. They've already learned that aspect. And so bouncing back and forth between this idea of blending objectives is a really great way to overcome the battle of time of when am I going to fit this in? How am I going to fit this in? So an example from my 5th grade classroom, this is probably 4 years old by now, but it's a great snapshot. I took over teaching science, or I started to teach science to my homeroom, and there was a unit primarily based on learning Earth's biomes: deserts, forests, rainforests, tundra, and they had to learn about the defining features of the biome, and they had to learn about certain plants and animals and those identifiable adaptations that they had. And previously, the curriculum was mostly taught through presentations, and the students would take tests and quizzes. And although there's value in that instructional style, that I didn't want that to be the sole focus of the unit. And so when I looked through the content, I realized that I had a lot of resources between the slide decks, our library databases for research, a great selection of books, that students could really find the defining features of biomes on their own. They didn't need to hear it from me after they learned what those features are. And then I started to look at the animals and the plants, and I realized that I could teach them about animals and plants that I chose, but really I wanted to focus my time on teaching them how to identify adaptations, whether it be behavioral or physiological, and what those truly are, and let them pick animals and then pick plants that they're interested in and identify those features as well as other general features of the animals and plants. And so I found a way to keep the authenticity and the rigor of the unit while also creating more student choice and making the learning much more student-centered. Additionally, I wanted to blend in technology objectives. And so throughout the unit, the students had to create little documentaries as if they were in the biome unit. And so they did the research, they collected the information on the biome, they created a short little script, and they acted as if they were Steve Irwin or another person you would see on National Geographic, and they acted as if they were in the biome. And they did it 6 times for 6 different biomes. And each section or each biome, I added in video editing skills. So in the beginning, it was just about filming, trimming, and adding transitions. And by the end, it was about adding green screen effects and adding other pieces into the video. So let me just show you a quick example for a couple minutes. And I want to make sure, just need to change our share settings. So to optimize sound. And Matt or Brianna, just give me a thumbs up that you can hear the video. It should work.
We are here in a desert in Australia. Deserts can be found in South America, North America, Africa, Asia, the Tropic of Capricorn, and the Tropic of Cancer.
The Tropic of Capricorn.
The landscape in the desert is there's not many plants and animals live in deserts because of the harsh conditions. It has brown rocky ground. See, as you can see. Okay.
So this is just a small, short example. You can see the green screen effect. You can see some other visual effects. It's not perfect, and that's okay. They weren't trying to make a documentary to win any awards. They were making a documentary to prove to me that they understood the content, which they did. I will also add, I did not teach them about different accents around the world. Clearly, I should have spent time with that because those were nowhere close to Australian accents whatsoever. But you can see the kids are having fun. They're enjoying themselves. And the great part about this was when they took the tests that were a part of the unit, they passed them with flying colors. They did the research on their own. They read the content on their own. They wrote the notes on their own. Then they wrote the script on their own, and they practiced the script probably 4 or 5 times and then filmed another 3 or 4 times to try to get it right. So they were engrossed in that content so heavily and way more than if I would have asked them to study. And so I found a great way to effectively teach the curriculum. And then the other powerful part was I did this with all the 5th graders. I did it close to the beginning of the year. My grade partners could then leverage using creating videos in their own units. And the flip, and it was switched. The video editing, the video creation was no longer new. That was the review, and they could embed it into new content. And so when you leverage that time effectively, you really can create opportunities to use it over and over again throughout the year. So I'm not going to spend time talking about culture. I just want to remind you, educator to educator and teacher to teacher, that when you spend time creating a culture in your room where student-centered learning is welcome and you applaud their opinions and you give them time to work collaboratively, don't ever forget about how important that is, because so often it's not encouraged or reminded of us because of all the other pressures that are put on us as teachers. So don't forget, when you spend time to really create opportunities for students to connect and collaborate, that is always time well spent. And I don't ever want that to be forgotten. As far as the learning spaces, the pictures in here you can see were when I was operating in a flexible classroom. And that's something that would not necessarily work right now. And as we go through, we're going to talk about learning spaces and how it has an effect on learning. And so, that'll be an important part of the presentation to understand how it impacts, how it can be positive, how it can be negative, and how we have to adjust based on the current times. So transitioning into more STEM focus and more maker focus, the maker movement is usually surrounding the conversation of STEM. And they're related. It's all a part of creating learning experiences. Knowing the difference, defining the difference, defining STEM versus STEAM or STREAM, those aren't important conversations. What's important is about what learning experiences are you creating for those kids. And so this is a definition from a Harvard journal about defining the maker movement. And the pieces that stick out to me are that they are engaged in creative production and they share their processes or products with others. And those are so valuable. They've moved from being consumers of content to being creators with the content, and giving them real opportunities to share their product, or more importantly, I almost always value the process over that, because that process is key to the learning strategy and also takes the pressure off of always creating something great or always even finishing what you've started. And so design challenges are something that we've commonly seen. It was around before STEM was really popular, or the acronym was really being pushed through education. And it's where kids are engaged in a hands-on activity. That's a simple way to define a design challenge. But I'm going to provide some extra detail and compare it to something that we put a different name on. And so a design challenge is where students are working towards a specific goal or objective they're provided that, baggie of materials. Here is your 10 popsicle sticks, 3 rubber bands, and a plastic spoon. They get that standard slot of supplies. It's typically a somewhat of a competitive atmosphere, and it's great for culminating projects. It's great for team building. It's great for just increasing enthusiasm and passion about the classroom. And so an example could be use the provided materials only and build a bridge with the largest span. And so that is just a simple way to define that. However, in comparison, I also, and us at STEM Camp, like to talk about a makerspace challenge. And so we define a makerspace challenge as very similar, but a little bit different. They are working towards a common goal. However, you may have a corner or a space of supplies and building materials available where the students can creatively decide which ones they want to use. Maybe you tag prices to it so you can bring in some math skills. And these are great for inspiring creativity and allowing students to pursue it in a more open-ended way. You'll still get the collaboration, you'll still get the team building aspect, but you're not providing the students the box to build in. You're taking the box away or you're bringing them outside of the box. And so a similar activity with a different spin is design a model bridge to allow for automobile, train, and pedestrians to travel in a safe manner. So this is taking a little bit more of a real world approach. And how can they design a bridge that has that span, but also is designed in a way for multiple forms of transportation? So this just, again, brings that piece in. And a lot of times, although this isn't an example, with makerspace challenges, you can find ways to bring in empathy to it. So creating a prosthetic hand, that is a way to bring empathy into it, where the students start to realize that people don't always have the same advantages that they have. So similar to the topic of blending your objectives, how do I integrate these strategies into my subject area? So I'm going to take you through some very specific lessons where I am targeting specific content, specific grade levels, and specific objectives and standards. The standards might not be indicated because we all have different standards across states, but they're generally the same when you look state to state. I challenge you to look at this activity and think one of two things. Wow, I teach that. Can I just steal this right now and use it? If you can, great, please do. Tag me on Twitter and say thanks, or just tag me on Twitter and say, I redesigned the lesson, I made it better than you even planned. Or look at the lesson and say, I don't teach that age level, or I don't teach that content, but how can I tweak it? How can I modify it to fit my curriculum? If I give an example of elementary ELA, which I will, English Language Arts, well, there's a lot of common threads between early literature, early reading strategies, and learning world language at a high school. So there's a way to find those common threads, and I challenge you to do so. Please add them to the chat with ideas or add questions that we can talk about. So my first example is integrating STEM standards into, like I said, an elementary ELA lesson. So after reading the story, The Three Little Pigs, students will construct homes. They'll utilize toothpicks, gumdrops, and students will try to build the tallest house. This is a very common lesson that I see a lot with primary teachers. And although I'm going to offer a way to improve it, I'm not knocking this. This is a great lesson. You're getting kids actively engaged and excited after you read a story. However, there is a way to incorporate those same STEM standards that are in that example activity now and extend and expand the curriculum and continue the curricular learning. And so the example is, again, you'll read the story and they will construct homes. But they'll be provided a few different materials and they will have to create a hay house, a stick house, and a brick house, the 3 houses from the 3 pigs. They will then have to reenact the story for their teacher. So the teacher can come around as the big bad wolf and can have the story, and the kids can reenact the story. So what's great about a lesson like this is not only are they going to use their building skills, but they have continued to think about the story because they have to build this in a way that matches the story that they read. I've done this lesson many times, and one thing I'll almost always encounter is I'll go around to a group And a student will say to me, Mr. Ehrmann, look at this hay house I built. It's the strongest hay house there ever was. You'll never be able to blow it down. And I look at the student and I will say, well, is that what's supposed to happen? And depending on the age level, I may have to scaffold those questions a little bit different. But eventually the student will realize if they built a strong hay house, they're not doing the activity they're supposed to be doing because the hay house is supposed to fall over. And so it forces them to really think at a higher level on how to build, but also how to match the story. And so that's the power of these activities, is you're getting a lot of the positive aspects in both. But with the last one, or the second example, you're expanding and extending the curricular activities. And so this is an example of how you can take something that you already have or add a little bit of excitement and hands-on and really extend the curricular activities and add to the higher level thinking skills. So thinking about how education is different today, we're going to start to analyze, how do I adjust? How do I make this work in a socially distant classroom where I can't have kids sitting close to each other? Or how do I make this work if all of my kids are learning at home? And so what I just want to say is I'm with you. It's tough. Teaching is really hard right now. But we as educators, we know we have to do the best we can. And the most important thing is to make it the best experience possible for students. And I truly believe, regardless of what needs to happen, we need to obviously make sure we have health and safety measures in place. But we cannot allow education to move backwards. Over the last 5 years, we've seen the value and people recognizing the value of collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. And we have to make sure we do our absolute best to maintain this in our teaching, regardless of the safety measures and the styles of learning that we're forced to teach in right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to break these activities down. We're going to look at one in each of the phases. So the first one is collaborative. That's just I'm calling that 2019 normal. There was no health restrictions in place. We could make it as collaborative as we wanted. Socially distanced is maintaining that atmosphere, but we need to keep students physically separated. And how do we do that? And then at home is figuring out, how do I get this activity to work with all of my kids at home, and I'm only connecting through Zoom or another video-based platform. So here's the original activity that I outlined, with them building the houses and reenacting. And here's a way to do it in a socially distant atmosphere. So they still read the story. They still have to design the houses based on the supplies that were given, but you're going to distribute them to designated locations instead of having students walking towards a makerspace to collect. While they reenact their houses, they will film from a distance. So they're going to pick up their iPads or their computers or any device that they have, and they're going to film each piece individually. And then they can share those clips through some sort of cloud service, and they can put the 3 clips together. This would require more skills to teach your kids. It would require to teach them, how to save to Google Drive or how to AirDrop, depending on the devices you're using. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just means it's going to take more time. And I think that's a reality of everything right now, is it's going to take a little bit more time, but we can't devalue what we're doing with students. And so this would be a great way to do the same activity, actually learn a little bit more, but still maintain that distance. And at home, so the teacher records him or herself reading the story, or they find a recording online. The students will be assigned to a specific house type in their group, and they'll have to brainstorm together, maybe with a Google Jamboard, or they'll be put in Zoom breakout rooms to brainstorm together. Each member will build their own house and then film their portion. So if I'm assigned to the hay house, Matt's assigned to the stick house, and Brianna's assigned to the brick house, we're going to decide that we're going to talk together on how we can build it. And then we're each going to build our piece and film it. And then again, upload it to a similar platform and put it together and compile the story. So again, it's going to take time. It would take a lot of support. And, it might be a little bit overwhelming to think about all that. And, as you look at these, you might think, well, I can't do that, but I could do this piece of that. And that's okay. The idea is to I'm showing you that it is possible that you can maintain these learning objectives through all of these different environments. Oops. So another example of a lesson, more of a hands-on learning experience. Students learn about area, perimeter, surface area, volume. One of these concepts would all fit in here. Not all of them. Students build shapes representing the pictures in the curricular workbooks. So they see a picture of a rectangle and they have to use straws to make certain measurements and recreate it, or they have to recreate a box. They have to recreate the things that they're seeing in their workbooks. That's great. It's a great way to bring in the hands-on kinesthetic learning. But we could do a little bit more. Students will work with a partner to build shapes with specific dimensional criteria. So the teacher passes out an index card or has a slide where it has criteria. And it says, you must build a rectangle that has this area and this perimeter. You must build a rectangular prism with this volume. Students will work with partners to build the shapes to serve that specific purpose. So it's just bringing a little bit more authenticity to the activity. They're still communicating and collaborating. They're still working together, but there's more higher level thinking skills involved with this second example. So how do we do this in a new classroom, socially distant? Well, it's pretty easy to do the same thing. You just make sure those partners sit at a distance. They're going to, this would be more important to have a common online platform where you're sharing the building challenge of the specific criteria. A slide deck would be very simple. You tell every kid, okay, we're doing slide number 1 first. We're doing slide number 2 second. And sitting at a distance, they read the building goal together, and then they build it separately and then showcase it to their partner. Doing it at home, you can do pretty much the same activity, but they're going to be more independent. But you can use a program like Flipgrid, where students post the videos of the shapes they made, explaining how they know or proving how they know that it fits the criteria by showing their measuring process and showing their calculation process. Flipgrid is a great video recording platform if you've never used it. You can create a video. Students all create videos to participate, and they all end up on one page where you can bounce around and view them, as well as the students. And they've added a lot of great features. You can screen share with them now. You can bring up whiteboards with them now. So there's a lot of powerful features that they continue to add, and it's a great free tool. So it just brings in and maintains that collaboration even though we're working at home at a distance. So kinesthetic learning and technology are two topics that typically are not involved together. However, they are things that can be brought together and are important to do. Technology is a great way to enhance learning, and kinesthetic, the movement, is a great way to teach. 80% of learners are kinesthetic learners. They need that movement. They need those emotions tied to the learning. So the teacher provides the students with a list of directions and items to build. All the directions are written in a foreign language or scaffolded appropriately for the students. So here we have a middle school or high school foreign language example. Students must follow the directions and use the items to construct the desired objects. They will reflect through a media chosen by the teacher on the problem-solving strategies they use to complete the challenges. So the teacher can easily identify vocabulary and words that they need to be able to read and understand in a foreign language, but use those to build and engage in something a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more exciting. So the curriculum is well infused and well used, and the students are going to think about those words more than just reading them and trying to memorize them. And it's building in an emotional challenge as well. So that's the original activity. In socially distant, there's different ways you can do this. One example is using an application called Goose Chase. If you've never heard of Goose Chase, I highly recommend you look it up. It's a way to build interactive and completely digital scavenger hunts. And so the teacher can build a list of challenges, and the students have to submit a picture or submit a video completing that challenge. And you can award points, you can make it competition based. There's a lot of really cool features that are built into it. It actually started for corporations, and now they've built an educator side, and you can use it for free. It's a freemium, and then there's upgrades, but it's really reasonable for educators. But it's a really great way to engage in something a little bit more at a distance, where students could be doing all this on their own device and sharing with the teacher and sharing together. Doing it at home, you could do the same thing. You might just need to build in a little bit more structure. So they'll still get the challenges through the Goose Chase with the foreign language and scaffolded appropriately. But if they're going to work in teams, which you can do in Goose Chase, perhaps you bring them onto a Google Meet or you use Zoom breakout rooms and you divide them up so they can talk about the challenge and they can explore it together and then submit everything through Goose Chase again. So just a way to think about using vocabulary, using basic foreign language skills and building it into much more hands-on engaging learning with also using technology. So
Hey, Ken, we can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, thank you. So my principal would enter my room here and there, whether it was an observation or not, would walk around, talk with students, usually talk with me at some point, try to share a positive comment. And then he would almost always leave my room. And right before he would walk out, he would say, wait, what subject was that again? Because STEM is a way to integrate your subjects together authentically and to really do some great cross-curricular instruction in your room. And so an example of this is one I'm going to provide. And it also, when you do this, it creates really great higher level thinking skills and those opportunities for students to think at a higher level. So another example here with you. I'm hitting you with a lot of examples because I want you to try to take away as much as you can. I want you to think about the challenges you're seeing, and I want you to think about how you can modify it to your curriculum. So the students are learning about Native American homes. The students will build a house to represent a particular style of home. So a pueblo, a longhouse, a teepee, we're in those categories there. Students work together to build a home with important defining features. So they're taking the curriculum and they're applying it to something hands-on, which is fantastic. But why not make it cross-curricular? Why not bring in other subjects? So they have to research the different types of Native American homes. So that's adding another layer of student-centered learning. And working in teams, students will receive a Lego person. And they have to construct the homes with the appropriate interior volume and surface area based on how many people live in that style of home. Now, this has just been pushed to a much higher level, possibly upper middle school. You could scaffold this down to not be so complex. But the idea is that these different homes were intended for different amounts of families. A TP was for one family. A longhouse was typically 3 to 5 families. And so in that research, they would learn that, and they would have to build a house like they did previously, but they would have to build it to a specific size based on the little Lego person. That's just setting the standard for what is a size of a person for this activity. And so now you've brought in those other curriculum standards that we didn't have before. So you have all the positive aspects, but in the last one, you have a second subject. You have a second area of focus. You could even bring writing involved into this, where they have to tell a story related to the people in that house. There's always ways to bring in more and more of the curriculum together. So we went through the initial example in a 2019 normal classroom, and how do we accomplish this socially distant? Now, this is bringing in a whole nother element. And I'm not saying that you should be able to transition from having your students build with recycled paper towel rolls to now all of a sudden know how to use 3D CAD design programs. But these are programs out there that you can learn. And I'm pushing these examples to that limit so that you can see all the possibilities that are out there. But don't think that you can just jump right to this if you don't have experience. But there are ways to learn, and that's what we're here for. So they researched the Native American homes, and instead of building hands-on because maybe you can't share those materials, they design with basic rectangular shapes in a CAD design program. There are free CAD design programs out there, and they have to build a particular style of home, and each student will individually construct their homes based on the design features. And to accomplish that at home, it would actually be the same thing. You'd be able to do that in school socially distant and in school and totally virtual atmosphere. So just more ideas of the possibilities that are out there of how these things relate. How do I fit robotics, or how do I fit 3D design in my classroom? It is possible, and it's not always related to math. even though that's the most common tie-in, this is a social studies lesson that's bringing it in. And so these possibilities are out there. The note I want to leave you with is I often find that educators feel the pressure to have these when they're doing STEM or they're doing maker spaces or they're doing anything in general. They have this pressure of making an amazing Twitter or Pinterest moment where, you know, if I capture what my students did or if I share this product, it's going to go viral. And the reality is although that's great and it's awesome to see that stuff, it's not realistic to be like that all the time. There's a lot of these things that will be in the lesson, in the moment, and your students will never look at it again. It's not always about creating an end product. It's not always about being a final project or a culminating project. It's about the learning experience. It's about, it's about the emotion. It's about the students being producers and not consumers. And those were the intentions of all the lessons that I shared, is that the students should be in the center of the learning and they should be producing content and they should be a part of it, not just consuming all the time. I want to thank you all for your time. I hope I was able to share with you some great ideas. Please take them, reuse them, recycle them, challenge me with them to come up with different ways to modify it. And I look forward to hearing your questions that are in the chat now or that you can add as well. I'm going to stop sharing that so you can take that back over.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ken. There's a lot of great information. And I know since we have so many educators on from all over the country, you know, they may be going about things in different ways, depending on where they're located. Some might still be 100% distant. Some might be in person. So I love the way that you included all the different ways that you can do a single activity. Looks like we only had one question pop in from the Q&A. So Ken, Shannon Miller wants to know, are there any particular Three Little Pig versions or publishers that you like best when doing this activity?
I won't be able to identify an author or publisher specifically. I know that there are some versions that are a little bit more gruesome for the first graders, pretty graphic with, I don't want to say graphic, but I'm pretty sure they specifically talk about eating the pigs at some point. So I would just definitely pre-read it before you do it, depending on your age level. But it's a great story. It's a simple story. And, you know, with that activity that I outlined, it was just an example of how you can practice your retelling skills, that key standard that's common throughout a lot of the standards and subjects, and build in some hands-on learning with that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Now, if anybody else has any other questions, please don't hesitate to jump in and pop them in the chat or into the Q&A section really quick. But while you're thinking about any new questions that you may have, or if you're still letting all that information that Ken dropped on us there kind of sink in, I just want to thank Ken again for joining us and helping us out with today's webinar. I think a lot of people are going to get some great information out of this, and will be able to apply this moving forward with their students. So there's 3 last-minute takeaways that I want to put in here from what we got out of Ken's presentation. So, you know, key aspects of quality hands-on learning, how to enhance curricular standards, and how to modify activities for traditional face-to-face school, socially distant school, and at-home instruction. So I know that a lot of our educators are maybe even doing some blended where they have some students in class and some also joining their classes from their computers, laptops, or iPads, or whatever they have available to them. But a lot of great information from that as well. So again, we are Maker Maven. STEM Camp EDU provides tons and tons of wonderful professional development options for us. So if you're ready to add to your existing STEM, STEAM, Makerspace, Fab Lab, whatever you're choosing to call it, or if you're just looking to supplement something new, with your curriculum or within your classrooms, we would love to be able to help you out. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. You can always email us at orders@makermaven.net or info@makermaven.net. You can call us at 877-MAKER75, which is 877-625-3775, if you don't want to stare at all the numbers on your telephone to try to figure out what numbers go along with that. And then there's also a little QR code on the bottom right hand of this slide. So if you have your phone handy right now, go ahead and pull out your camera, scan that QR code, and it will take you to our digital catalog where we try to keep everything live and updated as we get new products, new items, things go on sale. So you'll always have that with you. So there's no use to wait for a physical catalog to come in the mail or have to worry about additional paper waste. So we also try to provide tons of free resources, and I know Bree's going to be popping some things into the chat here. So again, please feel free to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We also have a new YouTube channel where we are going to be posting these webinars in their entirety, typically the next day after the live recording. So please be on the lookout for that. Go to our YouTube. Please like and subscribe. So if you're not able to make any of these live webinars, you can still get all this great information. Now, the one thing with watching the recordings as opposed to the live is that we're not able to offer you the certificates for the 1 hour professional development credit. So please be sure you check out our future webinars, which coincidentally, our next one is Tuesday, same time, same place, 4 p.m. With James Manifuco of Bloxels. So if you are looking to learn a lot more about Bloxels and how they can be integrated into your classrooms, into your schools, into your districts, as well as being used at a distance, there's going to be a lot of great information. So I know there's going to be a registration link popped into the chat here. So if you want to just go ahead and register for that right now, because that's coming up just in a few short days. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Looks like we're getting done a little bit early.